Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Wojciech Fudala, Justyna Boduch, welcome. Thank you very much for coming to the next lecture, the Masters of Architecture. I'm very happy that we can meet again in a traditional form, face-to-face, without masks, without any restrictions. We are very happy that you are here. Masters of Architecture is an international series cycle of lectures that take place in Katowice, organized by the Association of Polish Architects in Katowice. The lectures started in 2024 on the initiative of Wojciech Małecki, and there were supposed to be 5 of them, but in the end, well, we continue our tradition, and hopefully we will continue it further on. So we would like to welcome our partners. We're going to actually introduce them, but first I would like to ask the president of the Wojciech of Katowice branch Association of Polish Architects, Mr. Małowski. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again. As every year, we are starting our new year on 4 design days, and the first lecture of the Master of Architecture this year will be held by Andy from Fujimoto lab, and Wojciech is going to talk about the details. We have also a surprise, but Justyna and Wojciech are going to talk about the surprise. So feel invited to our other points of the agenda, only on 4 design days, today, tomorrow, Saturday, during which we're going to talk about our surprise on Saturday. But we also feel welcome to our association. We have a small exhibition, so we are coming back after the pandemic with a new room. So please follow our websites and our Facebook, Startup Katowice Galeria Architektury, because since this year, there will be more and more stuff going on. On the 16th of February, we will have a small exhibition devoted to architecture, unwanted modern architecture, and then the reception of architects. So please feel invited. So have a good fun. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the surprise that Mikołaj mentioned, well, I think a lot of you know about the surprise because it's not a secret. We are publishing a book on the Masters of Architecture. The premiere is going to be on Saturday at 1 p.m. here in this multifunctional room where you have all the stands. Although the premiere is on Saturday, today you will have a chance to win this book. So this is a book which summarizes the whole series of Masters of Architecture. There's over 70 labs that are presented there, which over the last 20 years have visited Katowice with their lectures, among which we have the laureates of Pritzker Prize and other rewards. Just to mention some, we have MBRBV, Set of the Moda, and other architects from around the world. And this book is not only an album showing the best architecture, but this is a sort of a report from the history of operation of our Katowice branch association, of what has happened in the last 20 years, what happened to the city in terms of competitions, and so on and so forth. And additionally, inside the book, you will find some interviews with some of the architects conducted by Justyna Boduch, who is standing next to me. So in fact, this is a first publication on the Polish market where you can find interviews with a lot of interviews with foreign architects in the Polish language, and not only single interviews like it happens in some journals, magazines. This book can be bought on Saturday during the premiere. The price is 80 Polish zloty. We would like to ask you for cash because we're not sure if we are able to accept cards. But regardless of the premiere, you will be also able to win this book today. Before we present the rules of the competition, let me thank the partners who also contributed to publishing this book. All the companies that are here, Fornico, Rehau, Knauf, Aliplast, and Ekniton, all of these companies supported the publication of this book. And there's also a Getze company. I know that we have representatives of this Getze company. They are here. I'm not sure if they are here in the room, but they are in the building for sure. So thank you so much for that contribution. This is an album with pictures of the best implementation realization of architecture. If you counted the cost of printing, we would need to sell them for around 200 zloty. But because of the support of this company that I presented, we are able to sell this book for the price of 80 zloty. And how can you win this book? Well, Justyna will tell you. So the rules of the competition are really simple. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to follow us on our social media portals, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And when it comes to the competition itself, you need to follow Instagram, subscribe it, and under the post, which is going to be posted after my presentation, you need to ask a question to a master, and then we are going to choose 5 questions, which are going to be won. Actually, there will be the winners, and then you will be able to get the book. And the profile is called Masters of Architecture on Instagram. So the requirement is to ask a question in the comments. Please ask the questions in English. And you also need to subscribe and to observe, follow our profile. The post will be present after the lecture starts, which will be around 15-20 minutes from now. So please follow that, follow the profile. Once the post is there, you can ask questions.
I also want to thank and mention that on Instagram we've got already now a post with our book, so please kindly follow our Instagram, ask questions in the end of the lecture, and we will have a poll and we will select the questions, and the main award is our book. I think we can greet our main guest of the evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, ahead before us, Andy Mdo, born in Australia, architect, connected with the Sou Fujimoto Architects studio. The office established by them was established in the year 2000 in Tokyo. It operates in the area of urban studies and also searching for innovation. Their sign is connecting simplicity with avant-garde solutions. Our guest, Andy, is bound with his life is bonded with Europe and Asia. He frequently changed his place of inhabitants from Australia to Japan, Taiwan, France, and the Netherlands. This way, he developed a position of an architectonic outsider. So, an observer who is able to observe architecture from various points of view and also from various cultures. He joined Sou Fujimoto Atelier in 2016, and he shall present to us the philosophy of the studio.
So now it's time to introduce the main guest lecturer of our evening. It's Andy Mdo. Andy is working together with Sou Fujimoto Architects. He joined the Sou Fujimoto team in Tokyo in 2007, but then in 2016 he moved to Paris to help open the European studio of Sou Fujimoto Architects and to help introducing the unique architecture of Sou Fujimoto in Europe. So I think that his projects will speak by themselves, so I'm not going to say too much. So please welcome and give a big applause to our guest, Andy Mdo.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? It's good? Okay, so first of all, thank you all for being here, and it's really an honor to be part of the Masters of Architecture. It's really a humbling name to be called. As Wojciech explained, this is a lecture about our agency, some of our projects, and the ideas we find interesting. We started in Tokyo in 2001, and we moved to Paris in 2015. Our Paris agency has a partner called Marais de France. Wish is here with us. I'm a project director, so my role is really to oversee projects that are delivered in mostly the European and North American context. Yeah. So at the core, we always start with nature. This is a photograph of Iceland. And for us, this really signifies this untouched nature, very delicate, the flow of the mountains. And the question is really, how do we approach this? How do we build on top of this? And here's something else we find really, really inspiring is this village where the building and the walls itself follows the flow of the hill, the topography. There's no straight lines. You can barely see what the planning permission they had to go through in order to build this, and perhaps there is none. There's a very organic flow, and the architecture itself is really in harmony with the topography, with the nature. And for us, the question is, how do you build something that invites nature and being coexistent with nature? And the first thing is that we don't build against it. We don't go on top of it, we don't go over it, we incorporate it. We try to think of shapes and geometry that work with nature. No straight lines, or at least in nature there is no straight lines. And to interact with nature rather than deny it. And secondly, in the middle, we try to play with limits of spaces. We redefine, we use layers, we use smooth relationships when things overlap. The inside comes out and the outside comes in. And finally, really interested in living in a three-dimensional relationship where, I guess the analogy is in a forest where you have the tree top foliage, you have the trunks in the middle, and you have undergrowth, and all of a sudden these three elements all coexist and they relate to one another without a boundary. And having spent time in Tokyo, it's really important for me to bring my experience to share that with you guys. So Tokyo is one of the biggest metropolis, if not the biggest in the world. All these small houses that are interlinked, and what you find is all of them are quite similar sizes. They're slightly different, they're slightly imperfect, but as you see this sprawl of cohesive whole, they almost speak to each other. They're speaking amongst themselves and with each other. The roads itself starts to flow. And many zones also appear vertically, and sometimes there's just no beginning and no end. And even programmatically, you can sometimes find this, top-class, world-class piano bar at the basement of a car park. Or some of you might know there's a 3-star Michelin sushi restaurant in the metro station of Ginza. Oh, I missed that lecture. Last slide. So here shows some of these human perspective on the streets where, a lot of the inside actually comes out, the signs, the refrigeration, the plantation. It's really this ambiguous breaking down of distinctions and barriers. This is not binary. There's no private or public. And in these streets, you really feel enveloped by the city itself, and you yourself start to enter into the private spaces. It can be many things at once, serving both the public and the private. And here is an example when if you think of drawing a line, it's very divisive. It's either inside or outside. It's yes or no. It's black and white. It becomes a binary situation. But if you break that down into gradients, you start to see layers and depth. And what that makes you do is that you have to look. And by looking, you have to think. And by thinking, we're introducing these different possible relationships rather than a very definitive one. And coming to Paris in 2016, or 2014, sorry, it's a completely different context. And you see Paris is a very old city where it's a city full of boundaries of new and old side by side, very sharp contrast. And very often you find places that you can see but you cannot access. And this really is a European context or even philosophy where you have to define. Being able to define is what the main goal of thinking is. You see the perimeter block, and here's the flame. It's a photo of Sou as he's entering Paris on a plane. You see the Ile-de-France, you see the palaces, you see really these perimeter blocks. And I think Europeans actually, well, this is a generalization, but you have a hard time having two opposing things coexisting at once. So these are some of the very simple difficulties or differences that we find, but of course there are similarities, which I'll get into. So for example, this is one of our houses in Tokyo, and the clients are very happy at the concept of bringing the street into the house. There's very few distinction between where the front door is, where is the perimeter. In fact, when you're living there, you really feel like maybe part of the room becomes an extension into the city itself, and the city comes into your house. And this house shows our interest in building architecture as a unique or ambiguous relationship with scale, with fields, with subject. And really, we have to negotiate this process in finding a common ground. And it's not at all different in Paris. We've managed to find a way to introduce our thinking. This project is the Polytechnic School in Paris, Saclay. And what we've done is brought nature into this, this learning space. It fits the French law, it fits the fire requirements, it fits the client's wishes. And I believe we won because we're introducing this very new and interesting relationship in solving new problems. And coming back to the introduction, you know, myself, I'm an outsider my entire life. I'm not French, I'm not Japanese. And having this outsider, you really have to, nothing on the inside makes sense. You have to reinterpret. You're an outsider. And you have to find new ways of understanding relationships. And sometimes in this process, you end up reconnecting with it or reinventing certain relationships. So this process is what I find very enjoyable and also valuable in my position to sort of translate Sou's architecture into Europe. And I need to do this. And you know, I find it also very helpful to have this attitude outside of my professional life, where I see myself as a teacher, and I brought these ideas into teaching with my students. And this is an example of an organization called MEDS, the Meeting of European Design Students, a workshop I did in Greece, where the students basically have to find a straddling relationship between, on the right-hand side of the photo, the graveyard or a garden of a monastery, and to the right, beyond the fence, is this pristine view to the Aegean Sea. And what they did is they found this perfect corner where two trees created a perfect amount of shade, and they created this platform strapped to the tree for them to enjoy. So they're really right in the middle of this context, and it wasn't a very strict brief, it was a very loose brief, and they simply found a way to find a concept that fits them. And another example is another sort of student-organized workshop called YASA, the European Architecture Student Assembly in Lithuania. And here the concept is that we wanted to have a closer relationship with nature, and they came up with this idea of hugging a tree or having a drink with a tree. So here you see at the very bottom part where we made these triangular situations where you can sit, and it's just comfortable enough to sit, but you have to hug the tree. And as the students developed it, they started to sort of stack them, and it became this vertical bar. And we had a final workshop celebration where we were passing drinks up and down. So I'll go into the projects of our agency. And the first one is the l'Abbé Blanc, which is the white tree in Montpellier. It's one of the first competitions we won from Tokyo and brought us into the French situation. So it's a housing tower in Montpellier, and Montpellier is a very particular area next to the Mediterranean Sea. The climate is wonderful, very consistent temperature, and people want to be outside. And contrary to that, when you have a residential tower, people don't like to live in that because you're basically taking them away from this beautiful environment. So our promoter, the developer's question, and ourselves was, what kind of a new living standard can you give in a residential tower in a location like Montpellier? And our answer is that we're going to offer this extra room outside in a living tall tower. And this is the view that you can see with the extent of the terrace is really quite large. They range between 20 to 30 square meters. And the view are quite tall. You can see all through the span of Montpellier. And it really offers this exterior openness to the outside that is really unseen in residential towers. And the side plan, you can also see that the Canal de Lay on the left-hand side, and this stretch of green spaces that we try to preserve by moving our building mass to the left, so that the green space continues. And in the front of our building, we also offer this green space to engage with the canal. And all the apartments are particularly shaped in this sort of slight boomerang shape where you get panoramic view and also cross ventilation. And a quick axo, I'll just try to help. It's not very clear, but basically on the ground floor here, by preserving the green, we created these two mounds of green hill. And what they do is they hide the car parking entry here and also the bike parking down here, so that the green continues all the way through. And we have the restaurant in 2 levels here. We have art gallery and offices and atelier, and then 16 floors of apartments. And eventually on the top, we have this common space where all the residents have free access. They can watch a football game, they can come have a drink. It's really a place where, these residential towers don't usually have, a place of meeting. And then you have a public bar over here with a shared central circulation shaft. And this is one of our favorite apartments because, well, as a kid running, chasing your brother through the yard, coming back into the house, run across the kitchen, go out the yard, and you do this loop when you drive your parents crazy. You can't do that in an apartment, but in this case, we have a terrace and another terrace that belongs to the same unit, and you have an interior connection and an exterior connection. So it really starts to make this really unusual way of living that you can have in this particular tower. And also we have these privacy screening and wind protection over here. But here you really can start to live inside and outside in one continuous space. And here also, when you're outside, it really opens you up to a new relationship that you have with your neighbors. Looking down, you don't see all the way down to the ground floor, which sometimes causes vertigo. But instead, you have this relationship with your neighbors, even perhaps with your little brother who is playing in the other room. So it's just really quite a new way of living. And the process in which we were working through this is making sure that the composition of the terraces are really well spread out, and also they are connected interior with the residential units. And every unit has at least one terrace, and you can see the composition is also very carefully done so that the silhouette of our building also penetrates into the sky. So as if the sky was our canvas, and that we don't try to impose too much on it. And also the rooftop pergolas are sort of these louver structure that you can see through. Here, the building is entirely white, so a lot of light gets reflected into the interior. Even though we have some deeper units, it's still very light. And I'll move on to some of our cultural projects. And this was the Hungarian House of Music that we won in 2014, and it was an open competition. Some of you might know open competitions are really a lottery draw, so we were very lucky to be able to realize our project. So the competition calls for 5 museums in Budapest, and we decided to go with this one, which is the music hall inside the forest. It's like the Central Park of Budapest, where the thermal baths are. It's historically very significant. And we simply are very interested in the possibility of bringing a relationship of playing music in forest. And here's a very simple concept that helped describe our approach, and it's really just playing music in nature. And we also take into account the nature where you have these tree trunks that give you a lot of visibility. You have the foliage on top, which helps you block out the sunlight, but also filters these really golden and glorious moments, and fusing that with the act of playing music together. And the concept diagram is on the left-hand side. Of course, you have this structure of the foliage on the top, this pure transparency of the trunks in the bottom, and we translate into the architecture of having our music halls here, transparent glass walls, and all the programs that are offices and classrooms that require shading or closeness becomes the foliage floating on the top and creating these skylights that allow sunlight to penetrate all the way through. And here's the side plan. You can see one of the important things is that it's circular, so that there is no front and there is no back. And there was this idea about finding your orientation, which is that you know where to go and how to go there. And there's the concept of disorientation, where you don't really know where you're going and how to get there. And in our case, having this circular shape is misorientation, where you know where you're going, but it doesn't matter how you get there. You just have to follow the building. You just have to follow this structure, and eventually you'll get there. And here's the winter view. This project was delivered early 2022. And you can see the shape of the building, also a floating thing, not really a straight rooftop with all these skylights, some of them penetrating all the way down, for example, to this amphitheater, and some of them going down to the office spaces as just interior skylights. And here again, how it sort of having bitten off by the trees, and how it relates to the greater context, and also these landscape that allows people to flow right through and right across. And a view of this, the point where nature comes into the facade and our building goes out into the nature, and having these holes to induce this coexistence. In this section, so yeah, you can see on the ground floor we have this continuous all glazing where we have a performance hall here, vertical access, the trees are in basically overlapping with the architecture, and up here you have offices, libraries, some classrooms, and in the basement where it's more light controlled, it's also why we put them in the basement. There's exhibition spaces and archives. And here we have this building actually BREEAM certificate. So it's very efficient in terms of energy. It's at a very excellent functional capacity. So even though we do these very architecturally avant-garde projects, we're really conscious of how to manage from Tokyo and Paris to converse with the engineers, with our builders, with our stakeholders to make sure that they do have an efficient building that creates sustainability. And here you see again the overlap. And the offices who gets a view to the bottom of the garden, they get a view to the sky, and also they are immediately right next to the foliage of the trees. And again, this extension, also the ceiling itself continues from the inside to the outside, and the tree trunks seemingly to sort of fall against the backdrop of the tree trunks. And the ceiling, these gold leaves are sort of, first of all, they're a reference to the academy of, the ceiling of the academy nearby. But also we found out that this gold color is the most average and consistent color with the forest. So from light green to autumn, fall, and the grayness in winter, we have found this to be the most pleasing. And near one of the amphitheater, completely covered by, this the analogy of the forest, the foliage above, but still having a lot of penetration, multifunctional spaces, so people do tend to sit here when there isn't a program. They simply enjoy this as part of the park. And again, the skylight with this kind of edgeless ceiling. And our reception, again, important to see that this how the ceiling flows all the way through, and a very generous lobby space where we also have skylights that bring down to the lobby space of the exhibition spaces underneath, and seating area around. Yeah, and looking at one of the bigger skylights where they're possible to sit. And the zigzagging of the facade also starts to diffuse the sense that you have a very strong border. And this is the main recital hall, and we had a great opportunity to work with Nagata Acoustic, which is probably one of the best acousticians in the world. And during the competition, we approached them to say, well, look, we want a fully transparent glazed auditorium. Are we crazy? And they say, no, it's really possible. All you have to do is make sure you zigzag the glazing and make sure that the sound is diffused and not creating echoes or reverberation at a particular point. So, and of course, we have very high-performance acoustic ceilings. And here's the vertical access to the top and all the way down. And you can see how the spaces also, in terms of scale, starts to increase, because in the bottom floor you have this more openness, higher space for exhibition, and the wideness allows this transition to be more infinite. And then the scale changes when you go up to the foliage area, where this is the library. It's a lower ceiling, and it's much more human in scale. And you have this the skylight above. And here I move on to another Philharmonic hall we did. It's in Prague. It's a competition earlier this year, and it's one of those, let's say, once in a lifetime, once in a generation competition where they were asking for really a lot. We ended up making this beautiful flow of a structure that resembles the flow of music. But what the brief really was asking for is a new skylight at this part of the town. The old town, the very famous UNESCO old town, is all alone here. And in this particular part, you have a neighborhood that is quite well established, quite boutique, quite hip. and then this part is kind of dilapidated, and the image isn't shown, but all this area is new, and right now it's a complete brownfield, only train tracks, tram lines at a different level. It's a total mess, and there's a metro line that runs directly underneath. So you can imagine mixing a philharmonic hall with a metro line, the kind of reverberation, the acoustic issues that we have, and of course engineering with the water damage or the water infiltration. So here you see this city is very well established. This is kind of the new part, and they're planning to put some of the administration buildings and the train line renovated here. And we're put in this place to having to deal with this very, very complicated situation. And our concept starts with acknowledging that Prague is what's called a city of 100 spires, so very romantic. And the river Vltava flows through it, and it's really a significant cultural artifact that the relationship of Prague and the river is inseparable. And one of our collaborators mentioned to us the Czech composer Smetana. He wrote a piece called Vltava, named after the river. And as you read through the score, the beginning is very tranquil. It's the river starting slowly from the mountains, and as it gets more intense, it goes through the country. There's some rock pools, there's some swirls, and eventually, at the end, two parts, it enters Prague, and the intensity immediately goes F, 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 F. The most epic part is where the city itself meets the river. So their national identity is very much tied with the music, with the Prague as an image, and also the river. So we decided to use this the movement of the conductor's baton and the 4-bar movement to sort of combine the flow of the music of the river together in an architectural form. So this is from the south looking in, and we create this very significant spire. We create a rooftop viewing platform and a VIP lounge and restaurants above. And the situation also is that you have cities on all three sides, so we also created a building that has no front and no back, and in fact it deals with it in quite different ways. A little lower spire that deals with the city, faces the city, and the taller spire that signifies its importance in relationship to the river. And it's a bit hard to see, but we also renovated the river. So we renovated the street front. The riverfront to create a new path which joins different levels. And this part of the river has been really not used for many years. And by creating this thing, we also create a new flood barrier. So instead of having temporary barriers, we just created a public space where it's always there. And this allows us to bring people closer to the river and to have a physical vicinity towards this river. And here you see the train line right underneath. And the ground floor. So we also consider that the Philharmonic is really open up to all ages in public, and it's part of our strategy to make sure classical music is no longer an elitist activity. And to involve more citizens is also one way to create more sustainable use of the building. You get more people to use it, you get the return quicker. It's 3 halls, and they're quite large. This is 1,800, this is 800, and this is 500. And of course, there's many other things, rehearsal halls. We've placed all sorts of different commercial activities that allow 24-hour use, and the path here to the river, or along the river, sorry. And then interior view looking into the river right here. I've got the major Philharmonic Hall. And the structure itself is, of course, the tram line runs right through here, and we created these 2 giant pylons that hold the peak, and the rest of the roof structure is a grid where we use this stand seam panel system. And also in the ground floor, it's really important for us to make sure our complex buildings function simply, in a simple way. So we know that the stage needs to be very quickly accessible by the instruments, by the musicians here and so on. So we make sure that our delivery, our storage, our stage, and our change rooms are all on a single level. So you never have to go up and down the staircase for very quick interchanges and multiple shows to happen, rather quickly. And here's the interior. And for 1,800 people, what our aim is to really bring the audience as close as possible to the musicians. So it's very compact. It's quite high. But with this, what we try to do is this cloud-like diffusing acoustic panels. No, we didn't win, which is really unfortunate. But if Katowice is looking for a new harmonic hall, we're pretty good. I'll move on to the educational buildings that we do. So this is the Polytechnic Learning Center in Saclay. It's a really big campus where 6 polytechnical schools come together to try to create a new learning center that they share. So it's a symbol of new learning, of teaching, and they also want a new way of seeing what common spaces are. It's a symbol of 6 schools coming together. But in the same time, in their brief, their contradictory is to also wanting traditional classrooms, which meaning that you want to have a whiteboard and you want seating and you want a lecturer in the front, this kind of typology. They weren't really able to move away completely to say we want a completely new way of learning. Architects, please help us. So we ended up giving them that, but we also gave them this green heart, where usually you take away the corridor spaces, and if you imagine coming out of a classroom, you see a corridor, what do? You leave, you walk away. But in this case, what you're faced with is this great green atrium where nature comes in, and you want to linger here. And you see these corridor spaces are really not corridors anymore. They're kind of spaces that change in width. They absorb the movement, and the zigzagging movement of the staircase, the way you have to turn also pauses. You have to engage with other people. And you see this section of the classrooms, fully glazed. They have the view to the atrium space, fully green. And also this ceiling system where we have like this with louvers that brings in a lot of diffuse light, and itself also continues to the exterior. And we have this glazing here that creates climatization, and also the inside and outside starts to correspond to each other by the use of trees. Near the plan, and you see how the classrooms are all orientated towards its green heart. The zigzagging or the kind of chaotic planning of the pathways also come out. They act as fire escape staircases, but they also penetrate to bring you outside. And we have these informal staircase amphitheaters for impromptu discussions, for lectures. And here on the ground floor, you see how these you can sit there, but by sitting there, you immediately engage with the masses and the movement of people here, and you feel very protected with the trees. And also, they create different types of light movement during the year. So you feel like you're really engaged with outside. And why don't we learn outside? Why do we always have to learn in classrooms? Here's another view. The movement as you go up different spaces, and you're never feeling isolated when you're on the top floor. You can definitely see all the way down or right across. So this is one of Sou's construction photos. We should be delivering the project, let's say mid this year. No, probably. In France, it's really hard to know. And another one here, you see the amphitheater nearing completion. And how this path comes all the way through, almost penetrating the glazing, as if it wasn't there. And the ceiling itself is a continuation of the same language inside, but without the waterproofing. And here's another education building or learning center we did in Switzerland. It's a competition we did in 2017, and despite COVID, we were able to deliver early last year, 2022, with no delays. It's really incredible how they're able to do this in Switzerland. The client is the St. Gallen University. It's a really prestigious private university that specializes in international law and business. So very different approach to Polytechnique. They had a very loose brief. They basically just wanted 4 types of spaces that allows them to initiate and investigate what kind of learning they are able to offer. The foyer, so they want a place where, almost like a train station, you come in and you're able to find your way around. Communication and learning, where exchanges and learning is through talking. They want somewhere to concentrate, so more traditional type where you are engaged with a source of information, whether it's the internet or a book, but you can focus. And then the property can interchange. So there's a flexible notion behind it. And our response was like, we think that a learning center should possess these 5 qualities: that it should be surprises, you should be able to find new things as you enter on a different day. Of course, quietness. You should be able to you should have a place to be at peace with your own thoughts, and what you need in a learning space. And also, this raises the question: how do we give them what they need? Then the learning space could be a tool itself to help you learn, and encounters where you can meet different people and have different discussions and exchanges. And we came down to this very simple idea where first we start with a grid, which is very much entrenched in the Swiss tradition of architecture. And from the grid, you can start to grow, you can start to augment. The grid is a foundation in which you can start to make choices, and programs can start to overlap, they can start to separate, they can start to coexist. In the grid, we started to take it into the architecture realm. The grid itself can hold both analog and digital education tools. Screens can be placed, double high forum for more sort of formal engagements. Enlarged functions to hold. We can have dinners there. You can have massive conferences, active corridors where you can shield one space as a private space, but the other one to be this very busy road of discussion. Glass partitions so that you still have some sort of connection. Flexible panels and pinups. So these pinup balls start to sort of engage with the idea that it's a tool. You can have pinup boards, you can have whiteboards, you can have magnetic boards to help students learn. And of course, with the grid, you can subdivide, and the grid can also extend into nature or bring nature in. So yeah, here the final construction part. This is before all the interior were finished. We're able to get this photo done. And you can see that the grid is really this very symbolic and very important part of the architecture. But the light, because it's fully glazed all around, you can see that the light is very present everywhere. And we hardly have any full solid walls. So here's on the first floor going up on the second floor. And also to break the grid, we create these staircases that are really playful because you wanted to give surprises. And their width is just enough so that you can have one person pass, but you can also have a discussion. So the staircase itself also becomes a point where you have encounters and exchanges. And the fact that it's all the way sticking into the grid, you also are no longer subjected to this very formal or rigid structure. And here's the interior where you have this cloister space where people walk around, they're finding new ways of using it. And of course, in a space like this, a big atrium, acoustic is really important, and we managed to achieve really good acoustic. You could be here speaking and not hear anybody over here. All the ceilings are custom made and super high quality, and these panels are also movable so that you can create different learning spaces, pin-up boards. And these are also acoustic absorbent, and if need be, they can be exchanged for banners to showcase what kind of conferences that are happening. And on the interior, we basically work with a few ideas. It's hard to see, but the idea is that there's a cloister that kind of surrounds the forum, and the cloister is the path of learning. As you walk, you think and you discuss. And this is also a homage to the St. Gallen Abbey, which I think is the oldest abbey in Switzerland, but it also has the first drawn plan of a building. And then the forum itself is, of course, a place to discuss for donor conferences, and also everybody on every level can engage. And finally, the interior is really important to be transparent and democratic. Everybody can see where you are, and they can find their way really easily. And here you can see the cloister surrounding the atrium on both floors. Again, another round staircase that brings you from the ground floor to the top floor in these panels. So we have this continuous path of learning, and the cloister isn't just around the atrium with the staircases. You again have this strange but exciting, fun connection on all different levels. And here, a very quick breakdown on the axle. All these are glazing, glass partitions. So you have like these loud spaces where you work, you discuss, you move walls around as you need. And upstairs you have more collaboration, you have quieter spaces, and on top is really just for private studies, for exams. And of course, when you have this, you have terraces, you start to have this opportunity by stacking things, terraces to engage with the exterior. And here on the exterior, we're in a residential zone. This is also the interesting part. The university is right bang smack in a very quiet residential zone. And because the way we set back our highest point further away from the facade, the only objection that we had with the neighbors, and this is in Switzerland, everybody wants to say something. It's this federation, this idea of I want to vote, I want to say something. The only objection we had is this old lady who lived here, and she said that your glazing is going to reflect the sunlight into a particular part of my bedroom where I have a wooden wardrobe, and that's going to age quicker than the other. I don't like that. So we gave her a bottle of wine. It's fine. We got through it really easily. And here, some quick diagrams to see how the frames join, and this is how we start to be able to create various programs within in the terraces. Again, we have this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Switzerland, but the cities, they usually have this plot of land where they give to the residents, and you have to sign up. You have a little garden where you can cultivate plants, and on Sundays or Saturdays, you just see masses of old Swiss people in their garden planting stuff. So here we have this particular kind of typology here, and we decided to cover our terraces with greens as a way to coat and to soften the impact in this residential area. And here you see to the entry to our front foyer. There's a path all around, and there's also little nooks of spaces where students can study. Let alone you've got terraces here that open to classrooms. And the facade was also, how do I put it, a pain in the ass. We all know that cubes are really difficult to make when you start to join them both in 3 dimensions. So that took really a long time to make sure we have this, also the downpipe drainage that are embedded in there. We have a triple glazing in a system called CCF, where they actually pump air into the cavity where it's completely sealed, which means that there's no dust. You hardly ever need to maintain it. It's highly performative. And we also built in mechanical blind control, so that I think it's 8 o'clock, depending on the season, when the sun goes down, the blinds go down. So there's no light pollution again for the neighbors. And some of these terraces are very popular for coffee, for discussion. And here the facade, you can see how it also reflects the seasonal changes, the lights. And here, we talk about this project called Chi in Lyon. And this is the project that you see on some of the flyers for the Masters of Architecture. And this image is made in the 60s. And of course, Lyon is a city in central France. It's close to the Alps. And this image from the 60s really sort of describes the ambition back in the 60s, how they want to develop this particular part of Lyon. And it's called Lyon Part 2. And this is where the main central station is. And this entire area was made in the 60s with big shopping malls. And of course, at the time, they thought it was a good idea, but it started to create a lot of urban blockages. So there's these new green, the blue parts are new developments of offices and housing. And MVRDV recently finished the redevelopment or renovation of this shopping mall, where they created a new linkage to the city with green path and green parks on the rooftop. And the red part is our site, where it used to be an obsolete office. It's so old that it's impossible to renovate it to become sort of compliant to the French standard. So we demolished it, but we are reusing a lot of the concrete. We're using the foundation. And it was really important for us to pay the homage to the 60s development. And what we have is towards the higher part of the new developments, we're taller, and as it falls down to the older city, we're also shorter. And this building is really one of a kind in France, and it's due to the regulation. Office buildings, you have a cap of 28 meters plus. Anything beyond that, it has to be a high rise. And for residential tower, it's 50 meters plus, and it becomes a high rise. And when you become a high rise, the implication is that your shaft becomes much, much bigger, and it's for fire safety. But it's simply economically unsustainable. So either you have an extremely tall tower, or you go underneath 50 or 28. And what we've done here is that we made a lot of negotiation with the city council, but at this level, 28 meters, we have offices, and above here, at 50, we have housing. And here you see the breaking down of our facade. That is, the grid is also really important for us to pay homage to the neighbors, but the residential and the office maintain the same grid. And here on the ground level, we start to decompose and break it down. Where you have this, and the reason we break it down is that we have this flow where you have these two main streets, and you're able to absorb or invite people to come through. And on the residential part, looking into the south and connected to the mall, you've got this communal garden and terraces. And the offices, they also share this north-facing garden on their roof. So here again, you can see this sort of passive way of being very gentle and being very respectful to the context, tall and low, and this breaking down of the grid. Yeah, and again, lifting up also the slabs, pushing them back, creating this central atrium, shared offices and cafes, really becoming a place where people can come and stop by. And the lobby, for us, is also a potential to be an extension of the street. So again, this melting of the boundaries, you can come in and people, while they're inside, don't feel dislocated to the rest of the city. Again, yeah, this lifting up of the facade, creating this very generous way of engaging with the city. Yeah, now we have the common space. It's also really one of a kind in Lyon when you have residential towers that with such generous terraces looking into the south. And here the offices where you don't need so much sunlight, they're protected in the north. But you have this beautiful view all the way down to the south. There you go, this is the very large terrace. And because of what we're doing with this biodiversity, and also this building is going to be completed in 2025, but we also BREEAM certificate. We also have various certificates of very high quality office for its health, its santé, its lighting effect. And we also have a certificate for the residential housing for the sort of the health in terms of the use of a material. It's long lasting, it's safe, it's very well lit, very well ventilated. And here we have these 3 gardens, and sort of give you an idea of the square meters that we're dealing with. And then the 3rd garden in the bottom. And it's really this jungle, because we were told by our sustainability engineer that by 2050, Lyon could feel like Marrakesh. So it was really important for us to anticipate that and create this cool heart on the ground floor where hot air could rise. We have all these shading, we have all these non-mineral material to dispel heat and to create this oasis for the public because it's on the ground floor. And here again, you have the 28 meter for the office right here, and then the 50 above, and how they share their spaces differently. So they coexist in terms of a form, they coexist in terms of the city, but yet they have very different functions, and they share different spaces. And here's the view from the shopping mall, looking into these residential blocks with all these terraces. And this is the terrace of the office, looking, I believe, east. And we're really conscious of creating biodiversity. So all these plantations are local, they're very wind resistant. And we, of course, work very closely with the landscape architect to make sure that the height, the wind, all these factors, the kind of plantation are inducive and welcoming for animals. I think I'm going quite good with time, maybe even too fast. But this is our last project that I'll show. It's called 1000 arbres. It means 1,000 trees, and this is one of the very big projects that made sure that we have a foothold in Paris. It was a competition in 2014 started by the Paris mayor Andy Mdo, and the competition is called Reinvent Paris. And the idea is that she picked 23 sites that were either empty or slightly out of use. And the focus of the architecture competition was to bring innovation in terms of the architecture, the program, demanding us to look into a new future. How do we live? How do we coexist with the city, changing our old habits and enhancing the good ones, and also the environment. But again, it's very similar to the Polytechnique project. There was a contradiction in the French context. They want this new architecture to fit into the existing urban rules of Paris. So you have to deal with this imagining the new, but you can't really forget completely of the old. And in fact, the old is somewhat strangling. And so this is a very interesting sort of design question that we had to deal with. And we do a lot of research, and at some point we started to focus more and more on these two images. And of course, this is the sort of typical roof line of Paris, with all these chimneys, with the mansard roof. Usually they're leftover spaces for maids. You can see the dome here. I think that's the Invalides. And this nature where you have everything sort of seamlessly connected with a lot of harmonious connection. We started to think, is there a way to bring these two together? And one day while we were working, Sue asked Marie, who was our director in Paris, she asked her, what do you like in Paris? You're a Parisian. What's the dream of living in Paris? And Marie thought, well, I want to see the sky. I want to be up at the rooftop. I want to live on the upper level. I want to have some greens, and maybe even better, I get to have a green park on the bottom of my apartment. So in a very simple way, almost too direct, we kept the typical Haussmann. We cut that out. We cut the top part out. We make sure that we bring the park underneath and having some trees in the top. And maybe this is the way that we can imagine living in a new Paris. And this is the competition image that we submitted, where we've created these new houses that are floating on top of the complex building we designed, full of trees, full of freedom, full of terraces, and you can enjoy the skyline of Paris. And on the bottom we have this park, very generous, and the name called 1,000 trees, also this agreement that we have with the city that we will plant 1,000 trees, that our project is good enough, or it's planned well enough to really accommodate trees for these biodiversity and really these greenhouses to store tools, but it's really becoming a park that you can see typically in Paris. So here in an overview, you can see the sort of this new green skylight that is elevated from the usual street level, which is unseen. You have the Champs-Élysées right here that leads to La Défense. We have this giant tower of Hilton Hotel that's attached to the Palais des Grands France. And you can see these little individual houses also at the edge, but they have access to all these greenery on the top. And here you see a plan of Paris drawn in the early 20th century. They had this beltway of old walls and old moats with all these little dots of famous parks like Jardin du Luxembourg, Bouchemont. And the idea was that the city was planning to create a continuous green park and be kind of a satellite where in relation to the greater Paris, the inner Paris region. But of course, what they did is they built the peripheric. They built this beltway that was, completely contrary. Created all this pollution and also a barrier between Paris and the outer Paris region. So far as we looked at the site, and this is right here is the peripheric, and we're hovering over it. In the section here, you see the peripheric, and existed on our side was also this bus station. So what we did was ended up pushing the bus station down to the basement, created this link that Paris is now created with this other commune called Neuilly. And as a result, you have this green space that gives back to the city, that is continuous, that joins two cities. And also you have this very generous and amazing living place above. And when we presented this idea up until now, the concept to the client, and he loved it. He says, yes, I want this. But at that moment, we simply had, in our physical model, we built a park, and then we had a floating garden on top, and the structure was just clear plexi. So we didn't actually know how it was going to work. Everything was anti-gravity. And Sou did this sketch when he says, okay, well, why don't we just make this V shape? Which means that you can still maintain a lot of the park. You can bring trees of a very, very high or age with a height closer to the edge. And also you can protect the offices underneath from sunlight. And so we did that, and it starts to work. And we also created these skylights or penetrations here, where people from the street doesn't feel this imposing presence of a giant building. They can see all the way through. We have one here that penetrates entirely, and another one here that penetrates entirely. And here you have these courtyard terraces where offices here, all of a sudden they have a courtyard garden on the 5th level. And here this is the side plan where you have the highway, the Beltway peripheric going right under. You have the conference center here with the tower, the Hilton Tower right here. And they're planning to do this renovation here where they get rid of this green space and just have a highway. And interestingly enough, right here, you've got this sport field that was already covering part of the peripheric. So it's very much in line with the idea of the reinvent Paris, that we are taking away part of the peripheric and giving it back to the city by creating green spaces. And here the axle, you see the contrast of how much green that we have against the backdrop of the mineral. And here you see this the base plate that we sort of cross over the peripheric, where it's a commercial center and food court. I think around 600 trees up here in this park that moves all around this bow-shaped upper building. We've got hotels here, we've got office complex here. This level is also housing, and on top you've got these individual duplexes and also even treeplexes, and a lot of trees. Here you see the connection from the park down to part of the city, to Paris. This is to Neuilly. And it's always this amphitheater where you can greet, you can meet. It's a very slow gradation from arising to another level. And here an axle. The image before is this amphitheater. So on this street, you've got this amphitheater. On the upper street, you've got another one here. And then on this street, you've got another one here. And this is the ground floor where you have the food court, the commercial center. And here you have this very generous path that flows through, and also another one here. Here you have the access to the bus station underneath in the basement. You've got the hotel lobby over here, and you've got some business course and the housing course over here. And here you have the food court with this full glaze that you can, see the traffic. And on the upper floor, this is where we start to have our plantation. It's a path that walks all around the building. We have these little greenhouses that act both as storage for the gardeners, but they're also greenhouses. Some skylights that penetrate down to the food court underneath. Here you have a kindergarten space right here on the top, double floor. And on the 5th floor, you see the hotel core right here with an internal atrium to bring more light in. The office, an office here. And here, this office has this spectacular round vista towards the street. And here, the view of the office with, because it's on an incline, this facade is on an incline, we're able to bring trees much closer. So you're actually working with the treetop foliage. And this has really been proven to be more inducive to a healthy environment in the office. And here's the sort of overall axle where you have housing on this level, but also these triplex and duplex up here. And 30% of this is social housing. So you also create this diversity in different people coming together. All the residents has access up to the rooftop to stroll in the park. Of course, everybody, the entire city of Paris has access to the ground floor park over here. And we were able to reach the pro stage, so we were actually getting permits. We had the structure figured out, the MEP, the floating part of all these very difficult structure. We're at a very, very advanced stage, but now we're on hold due to some, well, political discussion, I'd say. And here, yeah, you can see a night view where there's 2 layers of a newly made nature that you don't really find in Paris, hovering over this peripheric and creating this new image of how do we deal with the future of roads, the future of infrastructure, and what can we do with it, and this is some way to respond to it. And here with our housing on the top, again, looking right into the Paris skyline. So that's us. That was the very quick 4 project, I think it was 5, I don't remember, of our agency. And we have 60 in Tokyo, and we have about 20 in Paris. Each project is unique. We really do our best to find this common ground in discussing with our client what they need. From this, again, from my outsider point of view, we create stories and you create new relationships. And we always strive to bring nature or coexist with nature into the city. We also find that each building is, like nature, slightly imperfect, and we take that very seriously because people are also imperfect. We also see this as part of the nature of working with people. We accept that, and we try to see that as an advantage in the way that we work. And it's always important to find these differences and bring everyone together so that we can find a common ground. So thank you very much. If I have this opportunity, I also want to thank everyone for being here and my sincere respect for what the country of Poland is doing while you're helping others in need with very, very little that you have. There are other countries with a lot that are not doing a lot. So my deepest respect for the people here, and I'm glad I have this opportunity to thank you in person. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy, for introducing us the amazing work of your studio. We received a lot of questions to you, so now I would like you to join Justyna. She will show you all the questions to choose the most interesting ones and the winners of the authors of the most interesting questions. So we ask you to sit there and we will show you the questions. And now we would like to announce the winners of the second competition, so I will switch to Polish for a little bit, więc for a little while. Więc chciałbym zaprosić...
Okay, I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Paweł Broda from Knauf Company, who is going to announce the winners of the first competition. And I believe several people have won this book, right? Yes, 3 people exactly. Thank you very much for getting in touch in me via text messages. And these people are like one by one. Yeah, Edita. But Edita is not here. She was here online with us, so we are going to give her the prize. And then we have Nikki and Marta, right? Yes, so we would like to ask those 2 winners to come to the stage for this prize for the books, actually.
Gratulacje.
Congratulations, thank you very much. Do we have author here with us? Yes. Okay. We have quite a big representation of Sub-Warsaw as well, right? Congratulations that you are a part of such a wonderful event. Congratulations on the organization of this event. Thank you so much. Once again, congratulations to the winners. In a minute, we're going to announce other winners who won the book, because Andy is still selecting the questions, right? Until then, let me remind you that those who are not able to win the book today, of course, the number of prizes is limited, so please feel invited to come to the official premiere of the book. Then we will have an opportunity to buy this book. And
that was more of a fun
have it
question
made.
that I wanted to just share with everybody. I can't really answer it. I mean, I can, but I don't want to. There's one I would like to answer. It's, do you have any advice for teacher/architects, and what are your priorities when you teach? Architectural and beyond architecture.
Okay, so maybe we invite Janikowska.
Zapraszamy Wiktorię Janikowska.
Gratulacje, zapraszamy po książkę.
Zapraszamy.
Congratulations. Please come to the stage for the book. And besides this, we have also other prizes funded by our partners, by AliPlus Company, Equiton, and Rehau Company.
This is really difficult.
That's interesting, actually. Really interesting.
Yeah, I would love to answer it. Maybe I'll just do one at a time. So again, the question was, how do you advise teachers/architects, and what are your priorities when you teach architecture and beyond architecture? So my priority when I teach is to make sure that I'm not indoctrinating anybody to a particular kind of philosophy. I think it's important that you help the students find their own path. And then very, very early on, it's, you know, most of the time you enter a classroom not really knowing who that person is, and maybe they're at their graduate level, they've had 3 or 4 years of education already, and you weren't there. And it's very difficult to make, or I think it's really bad to make assumptions of who they are and where they want to go. So my priority is always to have a conversation with them about what they want to do, and see if my experience could help. And also setting up a particular interaction where they trust me, not necessarily for my advice, but they trust me for the fact that I can be there to have a conversation with them. And I would never say what's right or wrong. I simply would propose different questions that I've experienced and help them figure it out themselves.
It was this one?
No, it's this one. Do you have any advice for teaching? So I had a conversation with someone during lunch, and somehow we really veered towards learning architecture and teaching architecture isn't really about the topic of building or the technical aspect. For me, looking back, it was much more important about finding self-esteem, finding the voice that I have for myself, knowing that the career that I've chosen isn't an end-all. I can always change, which I did, and the fact that I changed, it brought me back with I wouldn't say a stronger passion, but it brought me back with a different perspective, that I was able to draw boundaries between my life and my work, my passion and my profession. So my engagement with students, most of the time, the most fulfilling and most satisfying part is where I understand that they have found a path that they find more comfortable to journey on for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long. But they have found a path that they're willing to try. So it's not necessarily teaching architecture, but, you know, to be an architect, to become a vocation, you really also need to be confident about this means something to you. And there's nothing more, I think, slightly disappointing to hold a degree, but realize that you spent 5 years not really wanting that. So I want them to know what they want.
Would you like an autograph on the book?
Can I do it later?
Okay, so let's do it. So who is another winner?
And I have another one. How do you combine the philosophy of cooking and architecture? It's easy. They're basically the same.
But who is the author of the question?
Oh, yes.
It's Paulina Nagel.
Oh, you guys know each
To
other.
zapraszamy też na scenę.
Okay, so please come to the stage. Is Paulina here with us? Please come to the stage to collect the prize. Yeah, as last time, apart from the book prize, we also have some prizes from our partners. And this is the last person who wins the prize from Rahau company. We have some more prizes from Equiton and Aruplast companies. Aliplast company.
This for me? Thank you. Should I answer this question? Oh, it's you. I know you. Yeah, it's really easy for me. While I was learning architecture, I really had a difficult time understanding the abstraction of architecture in a very simple way. I was going through a particular era of architecture education where postmodernism was still somewhat prevailing. So it was very complicated to understand decoding, deconstruction, where I find absolutely no relevance of these theories to architecture. Now I do, and I don't particularly like it. So the inspiration was really, how do you find a way to talk about architecture to laymen? And at a certain point, I realized eating and food itself, the construction of a dish is very similar. Again, during lunch, we had an opportunity to talk about salads. And for people to come to a chef and say, I want a salad, the chef would say, well, do you want a warm salad? Do you want a cold salad? Do you want salad to be layered? Do you want crispiness, or do you want different kind of textures? And all these things are very similar to an architect where you need to design a house for a need. And people tend to know, they understand what they like in terms of food. And there's no judgment. You can be a vegetarian, you can be a vegan, you can be a pescatarian. And it's very similar to architect. You simply have to listen and use the ingredients and the construction of these ingredients to create a dish. And you know, a very simple example that I always talk about is pasta. You know, pasta needs to be made in a particular shape where it has to cook quickly. It's usually curled or twirled in a particular shape so that it can hold the sauce. Also needs to be stored easily and packaged easily. And all these things are design strategies. These are design decisions that someone made. And a window is exactly the same. Do you want it to be cold, to be insulating or not? You want it to be open to the public? How big is it? Do you need it to lock? It's all these, they're the same thing. And once you understand the need, you can of course find the right way to create a window. So there's my relationship. It's really a very similar process.
Thank you very much. Could you give the present?
Of course.
Gratulujemy jeszcze raz.
Congratulations. And another winner.
Tak widać, wszystko dzieje się na żywo.
As you can see, everything is going on live, so there's still a process going on to select the winners. There are more and more emotions.
I'm going to pick one that I don't have an answer immediately, and I'm going to try to talk about it, or figure out the answer as I talk about it. I'm trying to challenge myself a little bit. So it's by...
Użytkownik Instagrama
We have an Instagram user, Gurkion user. User is called Gurkion. If this person is here...
Thank you. So the question again is, do we create innovative projects and involve creating new solutions, or do we try to fit ideas with technical possibilities? I think that depends on the budget. Very simply put, we can try to push certain agendas that we want, but if it's technologically very expensive, we simply cannot. But I do know that there are certain projects that we've made that we had to really create new ways of cleaning the glazing. I think the Milab, for example, the 1,000 trees, we basically spent 6 months trying to figure out how to create a new machine that could be inclined into cleaning the window of a hotel where you have a park underneath and trees, which means that the usual sort of cherry picker doesn't really work. And there are also situations where we want to make a building that is, for example, the St. Gallen, the grid. the engineers were just extremely good, and they were teaching us of techniques of building and mixing concrete together that we could reduce carbon output by 70%. So I think they do come everywhere, and I think our job really is to be able to listen, to filter, verify what situation requires innovation, and when a good solution is already in place in design. And another anecdote that I just remember is the white tree, where you have all these white terraces and then opening up to the outside. We had this conversation with a Danish partner where we're trying to work together, and they were very proud, and I'm proud for them too. Very excited to have this conversation with them. They were saying, yeah, we built our own BIM engine where we could calculate all the lux and light input, the energy input over different stages of the lifespan. And it's something that we built as a plugin inside our office. And it's because the clients love this thing. And, you know, my reaction was, wow, you guys are really good. We can do that. Good for you. And the anecdote is that when we had this interior spaces of the L'Arbre Blanc, the white tree, we simply had white terraces, and that reflected plenty of light into the apartment. So we didn't have any technological advancement. We just simply had a design strategy that simply worked. So it's interesting. Sometimes technology could be very assuring because some people need that assurance through numbers, through calculations, but the residents, they didn't care.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Max Coffee 50.
Okay, Max Coffee 50, congratulations.
I to dziewczyna. Zapraszamy.
And it's a girl. Come to the stage, please. Congratulations.
So the question was, that's okay. Can AI really make design architects and urbanists' work obsolete? The short question is yes and no. I think the best part about our architecture education system is that we create we're really good at three things, and the first thing is, of course, synergy. We find the complexity of the problem, we find different stakeholders, and we try to bring them together to find a common ground. The second thing is an analysis, where we start to think beyond the box and try to find solutions to deal with the complexity of the problem. And the final thing is that we're really good at making things happen through planning permit, reading the law, finding ways to go around the law, reinterpreting what the law actually represents. And I think these three things are very difficult to be replaced by AI. Yeah. So no, actually, the short answer is no.
Okay, congratulations. And I think that we have time for one more question. So I think that we have one more good book on our backstage. So if you could choose one more, is it okay, Andy?
Of course.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'll take one that's a bit easier for me because it's about my personal experience. It's by Rob Zapala.
Rob Zapala. Pytanie, czy Rob jest z nami?
The question is, Rob is here. I'm not sure because I knew that he wanted to see the lecture online. Rob Zapala, are you here with us?
Okay, probably it's a person who watched
streaming.
online. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, do I need to repeat the question? Or was it
Yes, we sent the gift, the book him. So
Okay.
if you can you answer?
So we just asked the author to send us his address, his postal address.
Very nice. The question is, after years of experience, how would you, bracket Andy, start and develop your architecture journey, and how would you try to develop it? Do you have any regrets about your career journey? I mean, I have already started to develop my architecture journey, and it's the journey is both believing in some ways of the architecture journey prescribed by others to me, and that is, through school, through events such as this, Masters of Architecture. You see how the architects go through their journey, and in some ways, when I was younger, I was much more naive, and I thought those are the ways that I could go on. I had delusions and egoistical ambitions to become a young, successful architect, and so on. And my journey was very much, quite often met with partial success. But I think the real true lessons that I met was how flawed they are, where those dreams and delusions are not really of your own quality. So I had a very terrible time when I had burnouts. I really had I had depression. I had issues about figuring out what it is that I really want, if it isn't those glamorous star architect status. And that really took me a lot of time to sort of get over and find a strong personality, some sort of a confidence in which I believe what I do is for me. And this kind of relates back to the first question about teaching. How do I teach with students? And I find through my journey, the most important thing is to really know who you are, know what you want to do and what you want to contribute, and prioritize your time according to that. And of course, if you don't know, it's really good to try different things. I was delusional at a certain point working on an airport renovation project where I absolutely hated it. And that's when I quit and I started teaching and I started cooking ramen. And those experiences really brought me new friendship, new perspectives, and new opportunities. And I remember I was in 2016 cooking ramen in Amsterdam thinking, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. I barely have a living status in Amsterdam. I'm running out of money. Teaching is not enough to sustain me. And then I got a call from Marie and Sue saying, "Oh, we're starting a new office. Would you like to come?" And those are things that I never planned for. I never pushed. But somehow being away from architecture gave me some sort of a space to think about it. And I was able to sort of ask them the right things on my behalf in terms of contract, in terms of my terms and conditions to work for them again. So if I wasn't burned, if I didn't have these obstacles or failures, I don't think I would have known what I wanted as clearly as I do now. So I think the journey, it's really corny, but I think it really starts with knowing what you want. Everything will fall in place. And also another thing is I don't have these kind of, what do you call, trinity of the first project. You don't have a rich family. You don't have rich friends. You don't have a rich uncle to do a cafe or a renovation. I don't have any of that. So for a very long time, I thought my friends who were able to get that, there was, of course, a sense of jealousy. There was also a sense of envious. Why don't I have that? And the fact that you don't have it is nothing you can do about. And you start to beat yourself up. You start to question yourself whether you are talented enough, and so on and so forth. And these were important, I think, learning passage to go through. But at a certain point, they're not necessary. And I'm glad I went through that, and now I'm comfortable being who I am. And of course, again, very honored that that particular attitude has brought me to a stage where I could comfortably share very personal experiences, almost non-architecturally related. But without those qualities, I think I wouldn't be an architect. I wouldn't be a teacher that is able to talk about things in the way that I do with my students. So the journey itself is maybe not architectural, it's very much about.
Okay, can we answer one more question? Because I would like someone from the audience to win this book. So can we maybe choose a random question?
One more.
Yes.
Oh, it's already
That's
chosen.
the same one.
So it's Korka.
Korkas.
Korkas.
Kasia Korus. Kasia Korus. Zapraszamy.
Please come to the stage, and congratulations to you.
The question is
Silence in the middle of a forest, or the bustle in the center of a metropolis. What inspires you more?
Thank you. I think it's the people, actually. For me, it's having conversations. And to be honest, I'm very uncomfortable talking to too many people for too long. I'm really actually very introverted. So it's always good to have this opportunity to talk with people that you really meet, you meet and mix really well. And if it happens in a city, it happens in a forest, they're all really good. Yeah, sorry. It's the end of my day. I'm starting to dissolve.
Okay, congratulations once again. And now Andy would also like to say thank you to you. We also have a gift for you. Of course, one of these gifts is our book. So thanks again for making time to come to Katowice to tell us about the unique work of Sou Fujimoto Atelier. So once again, big applause to Andy Mdo.
Thank you.
A my zapraszamy też już na nasze kolejne
And please feel invited to our next events, especially those people who failed to win the book today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming, for listening to the lecture. We would like to note that it is an important lecture, because lectures that we conduct regard education in architecture, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow during the panel at 10 a.m. And please feel invited to this panel already. We are going to talk about subjects by Masters of Architecture, and also I'd like to invite you to the premiere of the book on Saturday. The book which is so important to us. This is an art. This is a masterpiece, our and your masterpiece, because the Masters of Architecture, this is a cycle of lectures conducted by us, Katowice, a branch, but without you, it would not happen. So Wojciech is going to talk about details. Yes, we actually have talked about the details during this premiere, and we are going to talk about this during the premiere on Saturday. People who collaborated in this project are going to talk about it. The beginning of this period of creating this cycle of lectures was quite difficult. I mean, the contact between Poland and other countries were quite difficult, so it needs to be emphasized. The value of this initiative needs to be emphasized. The descriptions, explanations, descriptions of trends here in Silesia, it's a huge initiative, and you will meet curators on Saturday. You will see other people who guides, Richard Konieczny, for example, who actually showed to the architects Katowice city, showed monuments in the city in Silesia. So please feel invited to come and see that. And now please feel invited to the gala, which will take place in the ballroom. So thank you so much for coming, and see you soon.